let us continue to stand for the ideals for which they lived and died. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.
Hello, welcome to Justice for Veterans. I'm David Standridge. I'm a licensed attorney in the state of New Mexico. I've been practicing law since 1996. I am licensed before the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims and currently serve as a VA recognized advocate for veterans disability claims. We're glad you could join us today. This show is created to help educate and inform veterans about different services and activities that are going on in the community. And before we begin today's show, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Joe. He didn't want me to mention his last name, but one of our viewers who sent me this great hat from the USS New Mexico. One of our viewers who sent me this hat, and I wanted to say thank you to Joe for sending me this hat. This is what we're here for, to provide information and to give advice and services to veterans. Thanks again for your service to our nation, and we welcome you again to Justice for Veterans. In this part of Justice for Veterans, we like to discuss different issues regarding veterans' disability claims. And in today's episode, I want to talk a little bit about delays. Now, anybody who is familiar with the VA system knows that delays are a natural part of the process. Unfortunately, the delays are happening too long and too frequently for our veterans, and a great injustice is being done. Just go on the computer anytime, Google veterans disability benefits and delay, and you'll find a whole wealth of information. The last statistic I saw was about close to 1 million claims that are currently backlogged and delayed as a result of the red tape that's going on in the VA. So I have 2 tips and 2 secrets I like to tell people to help overcome these delays that are occurring in the VA process. One, I like to say, don't spray and pray. What I mean by that is oftentimes veterans will go in and they're being told by service organizations, throw everything on the wall and see what will stick. And I understand that to some regards, but when you're at the appellate level, either through a DRO hearing or going to the BVA or the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, you need to be laser focused on the thing that can win for you and help you win your disability claim. Don't stick to everything, even if it's not a winning argument. That's why I say don't spray and pray. Another tip is obtain new evidence. When you go in, I see vets a lot of times going in with the same old evidence, just thinking they're going to get someone else to look at it and come up with something different. That's not the way it works. You need new evidence at each level of where you're doing your appeal and the rules that allow for that new evidence. So those are 2 tips and tricks that I like to use that I think are successful in overcoming some of these delays. If you have any questions regarding your VA disability claim or how the process may work, then go ahead and contact me, David Standridge, at info@justicelegalgroup.com, and we'll answer your questions to the best of our ability. On this part of our show, we want to salute a veteran and say thank you for your service. Now, why do we do this on our show? We believe very strongly that it's important and necessary to say thank you to the brave men and women who have served our nation. Oftentimes in our society, we don't say thank you enough, and on this show, we want to make sure that we say thank you to the men and women who so bravely serve so that we can stand here and do this show today. So today we want to give a big salute to our service member, Corey, and I'm going to demolish the name, but I'll spell it for you. It's Kapahulua. Kapahulua is the best I can come up with, but Corey, we want to give you a salute. Corey served in the Army as an infantryman, and his time he was in service was from June of 1998 until November of 2010. He served as Sergeant First Class, and he was stationed at 10th Mountain Unit at Fort Polk, Louisiana. So Corey, this salute is to you. Thank you for your service to our great nation. And if you would like to give a salute to a veteran that means something important to them and honor them, then email us at info@justicelegalgroup.com. Give us your name and email. We'll contact you so we can gather the information necessary to give a proper salute to a veteran to say thank you for their brave service. Hi, I'm David Standridge from the Justice Legal Group. Our firm represents veterans and helps them obtain benefits in their disability cases before the Veterans Administration. We believe that you worked hard to protect our nation, and we want to work hard to protect you. Welcome back to Justice for Veterans. We're glad that you came back to join us today. We have a very special guest with us. We're excited to have today as our guest Pat Gaston from the YWCA, and among many other hats. We're going to talk about as well in her service to our veterans community as the Henderson House Program Director. So, Pat, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And so before we jump in and talk to Pat about some of her work in the veterans community, let's learn a little bit about Pat and who she is and what her background is about. So, Pat, the stage is yours. If you could tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you got involved in helping veterans.
Oh, there's a long story in between there. Where I'm from is Texas. I come from a military family. My dad was Army, and then they developed Air Corps for some reason, I don't know. They developed Air Force, so he enlisted in the Air Force. I am Army, and I have two other siblings are Army, and two Navy brothers and Air Force brothers. So I come from a military background.
Well, that's great. And you were in the Army. How old were you when you joined the Army?
I was 22. I just finished college, and the next day I was in the service.
Wow. And so did you go into the Army because of your family relationship to the military?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but short is I was actually my junior year in college. I was a little short of funds, and I had already been in an ROTC program, so I went ahead and applied and got accepted for an Army scholarship. So I finished out my last 2 years in college in the ROTC, and then the next day after I graduated I was in the service, and they put me in recruiting duty, and then after that I went on to my quartermaster schools, and
wow,
and the rest is history.
And where were you stationed when you were in the military?
I was stationed Fort Jackson, I was stationed in Honduras, I was stationed in Korea, I was stationed in Germany, and then I actually traveled a lot more places than I was actually stationed, which is a great part about being in the military, was travel.
Sure.
So I was all over Europe. I was in Spain. I was in France. I've been everywhere.
That's
Panama.
cool.
The military is good for travel.
Yeah. And so what years were you in the military?
From 85 to about 5 years ago, I retired.
Oh, all right. So you spent your whole 20 plus years, huh?
22, just over 22 years.
Wow. Okay. So congratulations to you for making it that long.
Thank you.
And so after you left the military, what did you end up doing after that?
I was always kind of part. So I did like 10 years active, and then I was 12 years reserve. So I military and civilian at the same time. So I had a couple of civilian jobs, corporate jobs like Frito-Lay, things like that. And then I went to work for the VA. As soon as I knew I was going to retire, I went back to school for X-ray. And the only job I wanted was at the VA because I like dealing with troops, and the patients I had are awesome. So I just love talking to vets, especially World War II veterans.
Yeah,
they're the coolest guys. They have great stories, great individuals, just the sweetest people you'll ever meet.
Sure. Well, what I guess compelled you to get into helping veterans, especially in the capacity you're doing now?
Well, I started with the Women Veterans in Mexico, which started about 8 years ago, and there was a conference here in Albuquerque, and the Department of Veteran Services hosted it for female veterans, first one ever. Over 200 females showed up, and they were like, wow, there's this many females, and there's actually over 16,000, actually over 20,000 now, female veterans in the state of New Mexico. So I was actually on the very first board for that, and then I subsequently became the commander for the Women Veterans in Mexico, and our total mission was to help females and let them know about their benefits. And that's one of the things that really got me engaged. Was I knew a lot because I had been in for a long time, and I also worked at the VA, so I knew a lot about how the VA worked. And I realized there was a lot of female veterans especially who didn't know about how the VA worked, that they were even entitled to compensation for some of their injuries they incurred during the service. So that really motivated me to get out and educate women about what was available to them. There's, a lot of lost souls out there. Once they got out, they were just like, where do I start? They didn't even know how to get started in the process. And because I had been through all that, then I could use my experience to help them out. So that's kind of what motivated me, as I saw so many people who did not know that they were entitled to their benefits in school, education, and things like that.
And how long did you serve as the president of the Women's Veterans for New Mexico?
For 3 years.
3 years. That's great. What a great honor for you. And so I want to take a quick rabbit trail before I talk to you about what you're doing at the YWCA. But in my practice, I've seen a lot of women women veterans who suffered from sexual assault in the military.
Yes.
Has that been something you've had a hand in working with women vets on?
That's another one that's that's a huge problem out there, and the media is just now catching up, but it's been around forever. Unfortunately, it's been around since women have been in the service. One of the saddest things is one of my patients, when I was in the VA, excuse me, one of my patients, she was like 84. And I began to tell her about our organization. I said, hey, some female veterans can come visit you in the hospital while you're here. And she's like, I don't want anything to do with the military. And I was like, and it kind of took me back. And she goes, I had such bad experiences. I don't want anything related to the military at all. And it was because of sexual assault that she experienced back in Vietnam, that she's just like, anything military just totally turned her off. And it helps. I'm so glad now that they're talking about it, because so many women feel like they're the only ones. And now they understand that there are more people like them, which really, I mean, good, bad. Good is that they're not so isolated. Bad that it's so prevalent that there are a lot of women who suffer from it. And one of the things I have been able to educate women about is how to go through the process. And there again, a lot of women who try and go through the process, they end up talking to males because there's not a lot of female case officers or case workers. So the men don't know how to handle it, and so they kind of dismiss them, and those women are again, reminded of the indignity of it all, and they don't come back. They won't come back for their compensation unless they run into someone like me or someone from our organization who goes, we do have female representatives now who can talk to you about your claim, because guys just weren't comfortable. And what I would tell any guy, if you're not comfortable, admit it to him and just say, I'm not comfortable dealing or talking with the situation, but I know somebody who is, or I can find someone who is, and then they can find the organization Women Veterans in New Mexico and just Google it and find us, and we will help them. Because once a person comes in, even male or female, because it also happens to male soldiers as well, and especially male soldiers will not say anything because it goes against all the norms and all that other stuff, and they won't say anything. And I recently ran into 2 guys and talking about this who said, I've never mentioned this to anyone else. And they let me know what had happened to them in service because they said no one would believe them.
Right.
And so they have the same scars that women do. So in our organization, we're there to help them and let them know that you can get past this and there is help for you. And that the military will compensate you for that, because a lot of women fall into depression and things like that and anxiety where they can't even work anymore. And so without compensation or any kind of income, they end up on the street. And so there's a lot of that where MST, military sexual trauma, turns into PTSD. And we'll talk later about where I work, but some of the cases there are quite the same. Is they get triggered and then they just have so much anxiety that it's really hard to focus, that they can no longer really work in the workforce until they get that under control.
Sure. Now I'll tell you, Pat, we went off on a rabbit trail on that one, but it's so important. I'm seeing it a lot in my practice, and the people who are victims of these assaults, it's not like there are military records that document what transpired. Exactly. So, when they're up for trying to gain some compensation, creating the evidence that's necessary to win their disability benefits is something that is quite challenging.
It's very
so
challenging.
I will tell you, Pat, we're going to probably have to have you come on again. We'll talk a little bit more
and we can just talk about that. Could I say one more thing about that?
Please.
Because I'm so glad you brought it up, because it is such an issue with females who will not come out to the VA and get the compensation they need, because they're talking to male doctors. And we want them to know that there is a women's clinic, it's all staffed by females, and that there is a comfortable place to talk about it. So we do want your people that you're seeing to know there is a place that is for them. It's on the 2nd floor, it's totally isolated, has our own entrance just for female veterans so they can feel comfortable. in coming into the VA, because it still is predominantly men. So a lot of women, if they've gone through military sexual trauma, they really don't want to be around a lot of guys. So there is a place just for them, not only at the Albuquerque, but also in the Rio Rancho. There's a female waiting area just for them, so that they don't have to sit with guys and be re-triggered from their experience.
Sure. That's great information that Pat's given to our viewers today. Our topic isn't actually the military sexual assaults that occur. However, we are going to put up information on how you can contact Pat later on in the program, so that if you have questions and if you know somebody who's been through a sexual assault in the military and maybe feels uncomfortable dealing with men in that environment, get a hold of Pat. She can point you in the right direction and give you the tools that are necessary to get the help that you need. So thanks, Pat, very much for talking to us about that.
I appreciate you bringing it up, because it is a big issue with our female veterans. So
well, let's
really
turn our attention and talk about what you're currently doing now with the YWCA.
You bet.
The whole reason we wanted to have you on here. And you are the manager of Henderson House Project, correct?
Yes.
Is it called Henderson House Project?
Well, it's a Henderson House home.
Home, okay, I'm sorry.
It's a transition. It's okay. We have a lot of time. You can call it whatever you like. It's great.
Well, tell our viewers about Henderson House.
The Henderson House was developed for female veterans in transition, those females that find themselves homeless and trying to start over. We are there to give them a hand. Going back to school, getting the skill sets they need. They might not have the skill sets from the Army or Navy or Air Force might have trained them for. It's really good for the military, but it just doesn't apply to today's economy. And with the way unemployment is, they might need to be retrained, and females are 4 times more likely than their counterpart civilian females to be unemployed. So it's a big issue. So we're there so they have a chance to go back to school. It gives them a safe place to live, and safety is a big issue with females. It gives them a safe place to be, and they're surrounded by other veterans, which is a really big part that gets them, because if they're somewhere else, another female is not necessarily going to be able to relate to them. So having other female veterans around is really helpful in getting them back on their feet again.
That's awesome. Now, how long has Henderson House been in existence?
It's just over 2 years old, so we're still fairly new.
Wow,
it's just over
great.
2 years old.
What are the sources of funding for the Henderson
We
House?
currently have it's part of the VA Grant Per Diem program, and there's also the Veteran Integration Center, which is our sister agency, works exactly the same way. But we always need funds, as you know. Funding for everything is really low, so we're always constantly seeking funds, because that's part of the grant, is that you have to come up with private funds to match the grant. So that's always one of our challenges to keep it going. So the program is up to 2 years. We try to get women back on their feet within a year, but they have up to 2 years and get back in school, and there's a lot of educational programs I'm sure you talked about on your show, which they can they have access to at UNM or CNM. And so this gives them a place where they can go to school and not worry about paying bills, roof over their head, safety. We also take we take females. We also take children.
Oh,
so
okay.
Women who have kids, because it's there's not a lot of resources in this town for homeless women and kids. There's just not.
You're right.
Unfortunately. So we do provide a place for women and kids. And then there again, they have the opportunity to go to school and not have to worry so much about what am I going to do with my child and all this, and not take away some of those issues for them.
In one of our earlier episodes, we did an interview with the Veterans Integration Centers.
Oh, okay.
You are essentially the same program, but
Yes.
on the side of helping women veterans. Correct?
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Exactly.
And so, in your role, what do you do at Henderson House?
What do I basically, when they come in, we sit with our caseworker. We have the social worker, and we sit and we figure out, okay, what do you want to do? Okay, you're here. What is your goal for this year or 2 years? How can we help you get back on your feet? And then we map out a plan to how to do that. So if, number one, they're usually unemployed, so they have no income coming in, so we'll set them up with food stamps, any other services that are available to get some kind of money in for them. At the house, we do provide meals and things like that. We don't have them pay rent. So they do give back, because we'll give them, we'll get their food stamps and things like that. So once a week, they'll actually provide a meal and some of the things they might have to go out and get, and we let them use that food stamps for that. Other than that, everything else is provided. So it's just a really good program. It's a very safe environment. There again, the women come together. They talk about common issues that they have being female
That's
veterans.
awesome.
And it's a really good program to get on their feet. So either you can go back to school, you can get a job. So we help you with all those type skill sets. And we use all the resources in town. There's tons of them. So we don't try and recreate job skills and things like that. We go to the programs that are already out there. Workforce Solution does a lot of programs. So we set our women up with that. We set them up with whatever they need specifically for them, tailored to them to get them back on their feet. So we start out with a conversation of, okay, where would you like to be in a year? Where would you like to be in 2 years? And we start there, and then we fill in all the blocks of how it's, the steps it's going to take to get there. And so that's part of my job, is making sure that they have all the resources they need to get there.
That is awesome. I'll tell you, not to sound sexist or anything, but I think what you do at Henderson House is probably even more difficult than what happens even at the Veterans Integration Centers, only because the women veterans, I think, pose a unique dilemma because they oftentimes have the children.
Right.
And I'm painting with a broad brush, I know, but they're oftentimes the moms who are taking care of the kids, and that offers unique problems. What kind of problems are you seeing with regards to these women who are trying to juggle family life with integrating back into society?
That's main focus. If you don't have a job, I guess you should start out with the very basics. If you have a child and you're homeless, number one, you usually don't have a vehicle. So it's very hard to even get to a job, to somebody potentially to give you a job. And if you do, you typically have to bring your child, which most people don't like on interviews. So the child care is it's huge. Sure. If you have kids. For someone to be able to watch your child while you can go for an interview. And then the second part of that is the transportation piece. We do have buses here, and that's great, but work schedules don't always permit. If you're on a 5-hour or you're part-time, the bus schedules aren't always the best for that. So transportation is the other big issue, is being able to get them to the job. So if I have a kid, first of all, I need someone to watch my kid because I can't take them on interviews and I can't take them to the job. And the only way I'm going to better myself is to get a job. So we try to fill in those pieces of, okay, let's take care of your child while you're going for your interviews. And then we set up some kind of child care within the city. There again, we don't try and recreate anything. We use the resources the city has to provide and find child care and things like that so that they can go to school, they can go to work, things like that. But it is a huge issue because if you're with a child, it's very hard to do anything. Right. You can't take them with you. Right. So in order to better yourself, you've got to have some means to provide for your child while you're trying to provide for your family and get back on your feet again.
What is the capacity at Henderson House?
We have the capacity for 10. For 10 adults, they share a room, and if we have kids, then we just kind of modify the rooms a little bit so that the parent and the kid can have their own room, or the child can have their own room, and so that might change our ratio just a little bit. We might only can do 8 adults and a parent and child, or depending on how many children. So we kind of play with the mix, but we can have 10 adults, and then we kind of play with the mix after that.
And we're starting to run short on time. I knew this was going to happen, and all these things I wanted to ask you, but there's some things I definitely want to get out. Sure. In terms of the process, if someone's watching, hearing the things you're saying, they're like, I know somebody who needs your help, what's the process they need to follow to get help?
The process they could follow is we have the VA. It is part of a VA program. So we have the VA does the screening for us. So they can get with their provider. If they go through the VA, they can get with their provider and say, I want to learn more about the Henderson House or the Veteran Integration Center. They will hook them up with the VA liaison who will interview them first. And there's a couple of things that to be eligible for the process. So they do all that. And then they get a hold of me or our caseworker. They have a meeting with them. We sit down and talk about the house, and it's a very simple process. I've interviewed people in a day, and the next day they move in. So it's a very simple process. We try to keep it streamlined because we know they're out there. We don't want them out there on the streets any longer, and they have to be.
And you help them with mental health issues as well?
So we don't reinvent, but the VA has excellent women's trauma center, our clinic that we refer them to, so they can deal with their PTSD, they can deal with their military sexual trauma, they can deal with just about any of their mental issues there and their physical issues. So there's 2 separate places, the mental health and the physical health. There's 2 different clinics that are great at the VA, and that's who we utilize.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's a tremendous program. You're doing a great service to our veterans. I thank you. On behalf of all of New Mexico and our veterans, thank you for what you're doing. So you gave us your card, and we are putting up on the screen the information to contact you. But if you can just tell them, the viewers real quick, a phone number if they need to reach you.
Sure. If you need to reach me, my number is 332-3033.
Awesome.
Again, that's 332-3033. And if you need to refer anybody, please do. And thank you so much for what you do for the veterans. We really appreciate you and all you do.
Well, thanks,
Get
Pat.
that reach. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. We definitely are going to work to have Pat on again with us because our time got cut short based upon our great conversation we were having. And she's a wealth of information, has a lot of contacts. And we want to thank our special guest today, Pat Gaston from Henderson House Program. Who told us about what's going on in the veterans community, talked a little bit about military sexual trauma and some other very hot button topics right now. But we thank her for what she's doing in our community and helping our veterans and helping our veterans community. If you would like to appear on Justice for Veterans, then send me an email. You can contact me, David Standridge. The email is info@justicelegalgroup.com. And that's the best way to let us know what your thoughts are. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are about our guests that we have and any questions or concerns that you might have. We want to put you in touch with the tools and the services that are necessary to assist you. You help serve our country, and we want to help and serve you. And so as we conclude today, we want to say thank you for joining us. We appreciate you watching, and we hope that you'd contact us with information and questions or concerns you may have, or maybe some other topics you'd like to see on future episodes. And we thank you for watching Justice for Veterans. And as we say goodbye, we want to thank all the men and women who have bravely served our nation. And we know that without you, we could not be sitting here doing what we're doing today. And we know that the blessings of liberty that we have are as a result of your sacrifice and your family's sacrifice. So we want to say thank you to you. Thank you to our great country. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
Thank you for watching Justice for Veterans. A special thanks to the Ronald Reagan Foundation, the Justice Legal Group, and the veterans who have made this show possible. Tune in next week for a new episode of Justice for Veterans.